session is sponsored by Microsoft Azure. We have some wonderful instructors today for you guys. We're going to be posting our link to the resources in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to download VS Code yet, there will be some instructions on there. Yes. And if for whatever reason you're unable to download VS Code, or for whatever reason, feel free to use the online compiler for tonight. And yeah, we'll get started shortly. We'll give you guys a few seconds. And if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the chat, and our team and Microsoft team will be able to help. All right. Again, welcome to tonight's event, Learning to Code Java, presented by our incredible sponsor, Microsoft. This workshop will teach the fundamental concepts of object-oriented programming and the Java programming language to those with little to no prior coding knowledge. My name is Christina Collazos, and I am the current. So Latina Geeks is a 10-year-old nonprofit whose mission is to educate and empower Latinas pursuing careers in technology. We host a variety of events to provide our community with technical and professional knowledge and ideas to help them move their careers forward. We started as a small tech resource blog in 2012 and have grown into an organization with over 2,000 members, multiple chapters, and have facilitated a multitude of programs focused on technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. All of this has stemmed from input from our community, you guys, and as the effort of our incredible volunteers, as well as checking out our website for open volunteer opportunities. And speaking of, yeah, so that's our story. We'll move on to the next slide. So speaking of volunteers, I would love to introduce the team that I have the honor and pleasure of working with to bring you events like this one. So we have Samantha Huerta, who is from Microsoft, so that we may begin the main portion of tonight's program, Learning to Code Java. So I'll move on to the next slide. Awesome. So our first instructor is currently majoring in marketing at UT Dallas and will soon start her master's in business analytics. She was born and raised in Maturin, Venezuela, and later moved to Houston, Texas about 6 years ago. She's the vice president of the Data Science Club and the captain of the women's golf team. In her free time, she loves to cook, travel, draw, and watch movies. Join me in welcoming Karen Alvarez.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks, Karen. Awesome. Our next instructor is a rising senior at Illinois Tech in Chicago, majoring in computer science. She is the vice president of Go Running Illinois Tech and a certified peer mentor. She loves to bake, cross-stitch, and run 5Ks in the city. She's currently working on the core office experiences team, and she's on her second internship with Microsoft. Please welcome Andrea Ocampo.
Hey, everyone.
We're so happy to have you here.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thanks. And finally, our third speaker is a rising senior at IT ESO in Guadalajara, Mexico, and majoring in computer systems engineering. She is the vice president for the Interns GDL organization, which helps students prepare for technical interviews. She likes BTS, Blackpink, and has a dog named Blue. This is her second summer internship at Microsoft, and she works in the Power Platform Environment Management team. We are so excited to have Natalie Salazar with us.
Hello, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Natalie. So without further ado, Karen, Andrea, and Natalie, we are passing the mic over to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. So we're gonna start the workshop with explaining what is Java. So Java is a multi-platform, general-purpose, object-oriented programming language, and you may be thinking, oh, what does that mean? So by multi-platform, we mean that it can be used in many operating systems from Windows to iOS. And by general purpose, we mean that Java can be used to create almost anything from a complicated financial solution to a simple mobile app. And another really important thing about Java is that it's an object-oriented programming language. So this means that the programming is based off of objects that are used to represent data. And everything that happens in our code is a result of the interactions between these objects. So these objects are created and they have certain methods that can perform certain actions based on their characteristics. And we can basically make them do whatever we want them to do. And again, if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. So to learn about all these important structures and functions in Java, today we are going to be making a dice game. So in our dice game, we will roll a pair of dice and our points will be the sum of the rolls. And in certain cases, we will be able to get bonus points. So if we roll a pair or a 7 or an 11, and we will make our game to let us play as many roles as we want. And the role with the highest number of points will be our winning role. So before we jump into writing the code, we're going to go over some tips to be a little bit more familiar with Java. So here's an example of the VS Code window. And if you're using the Java Online compiler, this won't apply, but it will be good to be familiar with it as Gaden shares her screen. So in the middle, we have our compiler, which is where we write our code. On the top right, we have the play button, which will run our code. And on the bottom, we have our console, which will show the output of our code. And to the left here, we have the Explore tab, which holds all our files and is where we can navigate through our code. And so here's some more tips for Java. As we start writing, it's good to write comments in our code, which is the green words here, which start with 2 backslashes. So it's good to write notes in our code to keep track of what we're writing. And if other people read our code, these comments can also help them understand it. It's good to print out lines for readability. At the bottom, how you see it, the system out print statement. These prints can also be used for testing, like to check what our code is doing and to keep track of everything going on. And to the right, we have best practices for indentation. So in here, the example is like an if statement. And with the if statement, the code within it has to be indented a little bit to the right, just to make it easier to read and understand. Also, as you're writing code, it's very common to run into errors, and these errors can be syntax errors, runtime errors, and logic errors. So with syntax errors, it can mean that you're missing a semicolon at the end of the line of code, or the code has to be written in a specific way that wasn't followed. So for example, when you're declaring a variable, it's important to say what type of variable it is before you write the name of it. And another example is a runtime error, which means that the code is missing something basically. So it can be that you misspelled something or that you called a variable that was not created. And lastly is a logic error, which means that the code is written correctly, but it's not doing something that you expected it to do. Like when you're writing a math operation, maybe you forgot the parentheses before to perform that operation first. So other things to keep in mind is that Java is case sensitive. So when we create our file, we have to make sure that it is a capital letter. When we declare our variables, we have to make sure that they are lowercase letters. And the very important thing that a lot of people forget is the semicolons at the end of every line. And don't worry too much about these errors because we will be walking you through everything. And so now we can finally get started and we can do the first step, which is to create our class. And this class allows us to actually create our objects. So for example, on the right, we see the car class, and we have the car objects that can represent a specific car with its own information, like the color of the car and the model. So here, every class has a main method that runs the code, and there are endless examples and attributes that a class can have, but we will be keeping ours simple. And now Karen will teach us exactly how to create this class for our game.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. So now we're going to start building our dice game. That will be our exercise for today. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So now that you've hopefully downloaded VS Code, this should be the screen that you're able to see. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, perfect. So if you were able to download VS Code and would like to follow along, then I will be showing you how to do this. We also have a second option that we provided in case you had trouble installing it. There's something called like an online Java compiler, and we sent the link to that. And so if you follow to the workshop resources, you should be able to follow along with either option. But for now, now that we have VS Code downloaded and you can see this window, we're going to go ahead and click open folder. And we're going to right click in here and go to new folder. And we're going to name this new folder Latina Geeks Workshop, or anything that you want to call it, Dice Game Workshop. Okay, so we'll go ahead and select that folder to work on it. And at the top here, where Andrea explained, we have our File Explorer on the left tab. Go ahead and right click on the Explorer tab and click on New File. And here's where we're going to name our class, basically. So like Andrea said, it starts with a capital letter. And I'm going to go ahead and name this Dice Game .java. It's really important to write .java because that will make VS Code recognize that we're doing a Java program. And click enter. And there we go. We have created like the space where we're going to be building our workshop today. So now the first step to be able to create anything in Java is you have to make a class, like Andrea just explained, where our objects will live. So we're going to go ahead and type public class and call it Dice Game. So you have to make sure that the name of the class matches the name of the file that we made. And now we're going to put a curly bracket right here. And you do that by doing shift, and then it's right above the enter key. There's a bracket key, and go ahead and click enter afterwards. So now here, we're gonna have our class. And then the other main step before you create anything in Java is in your class, you're gonna need to have a main method. So we're gonna do a little shortcut here and we're gonna type PSVM. And then we're gonna click on that first option that VS Code is suggesting for us. And that is basically the code for our main method. So it says public static void main, and then in parentheses, string and with brackets args. And then there should be some brackets. And this is where we're going to be writing everything. So these two things are needed anytime to do a Java program. So now I'll switch it back up to Andrea, who will explain our next step.
Thank you, Karen. So the next step will be to declare our variables that will store values for our program, and that can be changed as we run our program. So here's an example of how you declare a variable, starting with the type. And actually, in the next slide are examples of types of variables that exist in Java. 1 second. Okay, so oops, sorry about that. So types that exist are integers, which are basically just numbers. Doubles are also numbers, but they have decimal points or decimal numbers. And string is basically an array of characters, which is just a word, or like an array of letters, which is a word. And then Boolean stores either true or false. So if you remember from our car example, we can have a Boolean called electric motor to see if that car has an electric motor, and it can be true for some models, but false for other types of cars. So for our example, we will be using integers to store the numbers that our dice roll, and that will help us keep track of our points by adding them and everything. So that will be the next step for our game that Karen will show us how to do now.
Yes, so now we're going to go ahead and create the variables. And if you haven't seen the chat, and you said that you don't have the autocomplete option, then Natalie is actually going to be copy pasting code that will make it easier for you. So I know I just did a shortcut, but if you want, you can also just copy paste and it should work similarly. So you can always do that instead. But
yeah, Karen, I'll say one thing as well before you go into that. So we did our first example of you all following along with Karen. If you run behind or anything, that link that we sent in the chat for the resources has all of the steps that she is doing. So we understand there's folks that are here for the first time, coding for the first time, using Visual Studio Code for the first time. That's okay. That's why we provided those resources for you all. So it has the step-by-step instructions. Natalie just posted it in the chat. And after every step that Karen is coding, Natalie is pasting that code into the chat. So if you want to grab that and paste it over into Visual Studio Code, those are your options. So we have the files that we provided to you in that Latina Geeks Java short link. There's a Word document in there, there's text files in there, there's the entire presentation in there. And then Natalie is also posting the code, the finished code after each step. So if you get behind, don't worry, everything will be in chat. If you have any issues, definitely feel free just to post in chat like you all have been. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Samantha. And I definitely recommend having the Word document open, because that one has like a step-by-step of how we're working through the workshop. And then you can also copy paste the code. So, okay. So thank you, Andrea. Let's go ahead and make our first comment. So for our first step, we have to declare the variables, right? And then as Andrea mentioned, it's very good practice to write out comments to say like what you're doing with the code. So let's go ahead and do // and you will see that it turns a green color. And we will say we are declaring our variables. All right, and let's click enter. And so as Andrea mentioned, we're going to be using integer type variables. So the first thing we have to do is say what type the variable is, and then we create a name for this variable. So our variables that will be integers will be our dies, right? So we're going to have a die 1 and then a die 2. And then we're also going to need to have a sum variable that will give us a total of the R2 dice when we roll them. And then a total variable that will also add in bonus points for our game. So make sure to separate each one with a comma. And that will create all those variables. Next, we should create the variable for the bonus points, right? That you will receive for either getting a pair of your die or getting a 7 or an 11. So those are also going to be our integer variables. So let's go ahead and type again int, and we'll call it pair bonus and end with a semicolon. And then we're going to do our 7-11 bonus. So int 7-11 bonus. And then make sure you do your semicolon. And then there's one more variable that we will need because we're going to be asking the player for their name. We are going to create a variable to store that name. And it's going to be a string because that's how we store words in Java. And we're going to call it name for the name of the player. So there we go. We have created all the variables. Oh, wait, sorry. My bad. We need one more integer variable, and that one's going to be for the number of turns that we want to roll our die. So that would be an int number, since it's like 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns. So we'll call it int turns. And there you go. Those will be our variables. And then when you hover over, you will see that VS Code is giving you like a little like warning, like the value of this variable is not used. And that just means that we haven't assigned anything to the variables yet. We just created them. So they don't have a value, they just exist for right now. So going back to you, Andrea, for the next step.
It looks like there's one question, Karen. So why do we separate the pair bonus and 7-11 bonus if they have the same type as the first 4 variables declared?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Samantha. That is a great question. Really, there's no reason for it other than just like readability. We could go ahead and do this and it would be the same. And we can go ahead and put them all on the same line and it would be the same. So it's just to understand kind of like, oh, the bonus points are extra on top of like the dies and there's some already. But really it's up to preference and how you would like to see these variables. So yeah, great question. Okay, back to y'all.
Okay, thanks, Karen, for teaching us how to declare our variables. So now we're actually going to we're going to be using the name variable so that the program can show our name and our little welcome message. So Java has helper methods that will help us do this, and this method is called scanner. So with the scanner, it allows us to take in user input so that we can store it into our name variable. So here's an example where the scanner takes in the input, and then the output statement here asks for what your name is, and then you would type in your name, and then it takes your name and stores it into that string variable, and that allows us to be able to output it back into the console and the program. So that is why we will be using our scanner to be able to get our name to show. Now Karen will show us how to use the scanner.
Thank you, Andrea.
Mhm.
So yes, now that we have all our variables, in order to start this game, we need to welcome the player, right? And also ask them for the name in order to welcome them. So the first thing we need to do, like Andrea mentioned, is like we need their input, right? We need them to say what their name is. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to create a scanner object, which is reads in stuff from the user. So go ahead and do the comment, create scanner, and then now I'm gonna type out how we create a scanner object. So we're gonna type scanner, and then we're gonna name this scanner anything you want. I'm gonna name it SC, is gonna equal a new, because we're creating some new object, a new scanner object. And then you have to use parentheses, system dot in. Then make sure you finish with a semicolon. So that's how we create a scanner. And then you'll notice that there's a red underlying line under scanner. And if you hover over, so you can't click on it, but you have to hover, the error that gets shown to us says scanner cannot be resolved to a type. But that is just telling us that we need to import scanner. So how we do this is there's another shortcut we can do is just go to quick fix. So this is what VS Code is suggesting us to fix this error. And it says import scanner. That's the first option. So we'll click on that. And then you'll notice that at the top, we finished like calling for that scanner object. So you can do what I just did, or you can also just write this out in the top before we create the class. So Natalie will copy paste this in the chat. So make sure you add that to the top. All right. So now that we have the scanner that will let us read in the player's name, we have to ask the player to give us their name. So let's go do another comment. And what we're going to do next is prompt for and read in the player name. So here's going to be our first output to the user. And this is how we print something in Java. We write system dot out dot print line, or ln stands for line. So system dot out dot print ln, and then we use a parentheses. And anytime you want to print words, you have to use double quotation marks. So go ahead and press those quotation marks, and we're going to type for the user, please enter your name, and then a colon and space. And we'll make sure to finish that with semicolon. So now this will be printed at the bottom, and we need to capture their name. So to do that, we're going to use the variable that we created up here, string name, and we're going to say that variable name is going to equal, and then our scanner name, which is sc dot next. And that basically means that anything the user types after please enter your name will be the variable name. So we can go ahead and try that out by clicking either run here or using the play button that Andrea showed us earlier at the top. So let's go ahead and use that play button. And this is what shows in the program. It says, please enter your name. So congratulations, we just printed our first words in Java. All right, so let's get back to printing the welcome message. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this for now for y'all to be able to see my screen better. And now we're going to comment out again, print welcome message and rules. And then for this, if you remember from our tips said earlier, we're gonna do a blank line output. So some system.out.println and semicolon, and there's nothing in the parentheses. This just means that there's gonna be a blank line just for us to be able to read the bottom better. And you'll see when we run this again, there's going to be a space between please enter your name and whatever we type next for the welcome rules. So another thing that will make your life easier when coding in Java is that you can copy and paste. So I just copied and paste system.out.println. And now we're going to type our welcome message. So hi there, or just hi, comma. And now that we have the user's name up here, we'll use that to type it to them. And then whenever you want to print words and a variable out in Java, you have to use the plus symbol right here. And that'll just combine both of those things. So hi, comma, and then it'll say your name. And then we'll continue the message. So write up a period and let's say, welcome to the Microsoft and Latina Geeks dice game. Perfect. And semicolon and enter. And then Natalie posted
Correct.
the
We have a question in the chat. What does the X means in line 17 before adding the string?
Yeah, okay, good question. This is just something that VS Code does. It's not something that we need to worry about. It's just saying that this message equals please enter your name. So it's something that it does automatically, not something that like you should type out. And it doesn't do anything with the code. Java just kind of skips that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if you typed it, delete it. You don't
Yeah.
have to type that in, basically. So if you typed
Right.
it, it's going to give you an error. And Karen, can you show how to run the code again, step by step? I think some folks missed that.
Yeah, okay. So let me go ahead and show you guys how to run the code again. So can you see my mouse, like where my mouse is? Or, so I don't know if you guys can see, but there's.
Yeah, we can see your pointer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So up here, you can see it says run Java program, and it's actually right after it says public class and right before we wrote our main method public static void. It says run. And then there's also a play button at the top right corner. the VS Code display. And it also says here, run Java. If you guys can see my mouse, there's a play button here. And if you go ahead and click on it, then below we can see our output. And you can see it says, please enter your name. And there's a little thing there for you to type your input. I would go ahead and ignore this stuff. This is just talking about, like, this is just the link to where your file is. Some people might have it, some people might not. But our code is below that. And like we talked about for readability, we could actually print a space before please enter your name. So I can do that by doing this. Great, and now let's go ahead and finish printing the rules and the message. Andrea, do you mind reminding me like what the dice game rules are?
Yeah, of course. So with the dice game rules, our points will be the sum of our roll, and we will have bonus points if we roll a pair or a 7 or an 11.
Perfect.
Also, for the question in the chat that Rena asked, you may have to download a Java extension. So Karen can show like on the left panel, like where the magnifying glass is and where their files are, like the one with the squares. All the way at the bottom. Yeah, here's where you can download you can install a Java extension. So that extension pack for Java will be very useful for you all here if you don't see the play button. So let me know if that helps.
And then make sure you also name your file at the top, dicegame.java. That's also really important so that the program knows that this is a Java language that we're typing. So, but yes, the extensions are down here, but no worries.
Can you also show how to run it from the menu as well? So in case, I don't know, sometimes the VS Code can be finicky with like view options. So when you go to run at the top in the top menu.
Yes, yeah, for sure. So let me close this. There's another place where you can run your code, and that will be up here. So down here, I'll just like mention that I copy pasted what Natalie sent in the chat for the welcome message and rules. And then now we can run and test whether it's gonna print out for us. So I'll use the top bar where it says run. And then we'll do run without debugging. Yeah, and now you can actually go ahead and type your own name here. So I'm going to type Karen just to check that our code is working. And perfect, it's working for me. There's a space after my name, and then it says, "Hi Karen, welcome to the Microsoft and Latina Geeks dice game. You will get points for the sum of the dice. You can earn 5 bonus points if you roll a 7 or 11, and 6 bonus points if you roll doubles." So that's everything that we typed up here, and it was printed out down in our console in the terminal tab. So now I will pass it back to you, Andrea, for our next step.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks,
Yeah,
Karen.
I think they're just missing the welcome message code. I don't know if that was printed. Oh yeah, it's up a little bit in the chat. I'll print it again, or Natalie will post it again. But yeah, it's up there in the chat. There was a lot of messages, so.
And like we said earlier, this is available in the text file and the Word document that we shared.
So the next step, how we use Scanner to help us read and input. for our code, we will be using another Java helper class called random, which allows us to basically generate a random number, which is basically when you roll a die. So this first example shows how to print out a random number once we declare an instance of random called that we named random. But we can add bounds to it because sometimes you want to generate a random number within a specific range to choose from, which is why we added 20 into the parentheses in the second example, which means that it will basically return a random number between 0 and 19 because the computer starts counting at 0, and with the number that we include as the bound is not included in the generating of the random numbers, so it will only go up to 19. And now Karin will show us how to print out these random numbers to represent our rolling of the dice.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Perfect. So hopefully everybody was able to copy paste the welcome message and the rules, and then try their code by clicking on the run, and then hopefully your dice game told you your name and said hi Andrea or hi Karen or hi Samantha. So now we're going to do something similar to what we did earlier with scanner up here. So we're actually, let's go ahead and comment create random, which is what Andrea just explained to us. So creating a random is really similar to creating scanner. And we'll need this to assign the value to our dice. So let's go ahead and type random, and then we're going to name our random object, and we can just name that random again, but with a lowercase letter. So it Java knows that it's different because Java is case sensitive, which I know Andrea mentioned earlier. So random equals new, and then random with a capital R again, and then we're gonna close it out with a parentheses, and that will be it, and we'll do a semicolon at the end. So there we go, we created our random object, but to be able to use it, we have to do the same thing that we did for scanner. So we have to import it at the top. So hover over random, and we can click on quick fix and then import random. So you can do this. You can also just type import java.util.random at the top. So yes, you should have your random and scanner imported and created. So now we can go ahead and assign the value to our die. So first we have our die 1 that we created up here. So make sure you have to use the same exact name that you created for your variable. So die 1 is gonna equal, and this is how we use the random that we created. We're gonna say random, like the name of our random object, dot next int, like Andrea showed us the example, and then we're gonna do a parentheses. And this would give us just like any random number or any random integer, sorry. But the die usually have like 6 sides, right? And it's numbered all the way from 1 to 6. So that's what we want to be able to replicate with Java. So basically we're going to write 6 as our bound. And then this is just an automatic VS code. It says bound and then a colon. It's just like explaining what we did, I guess. But that's not something you have to type, just a 6 in the parentheses. And then because, like Andrea just explained, computers start counting from 0, which is not like us. We start like counting from 1, right? So this means that this number right here would give us something between 0 and 5 because it doesn't include the 6. And we don't want that because we don't want a die to be assigned the value of 0. So we're going to go ahead and solve that by adding a 1. And that means that now it's going to give us a number between 0 and 5, but then adding a 1. So it's going to give us a number between 1 and 6, which is what we want. And then we'll do the exact same for our second die, since they are the same. But we do need to type it out again because we want to get a different random number, or potentially the same one, and we would get a pair bonus in that case. So die 2 is the same, and you could have copy pasted and just switched this to a 2. And then let's also go ahead and assign the value to our dice together. So we're gonna use the variable that we created up here called sum. And let's go ahead and say the sum of the die is gonna be, of course, the die 1 plus our die 2. So now back to Andrea so we can know what our next steps are.
Okay, so now that we have generated our random numbers for that represent our die and our roll, Karin actually showed how basic math operations work in Java. They basically work the same as like normal math, how we showed that the sum was we set that equal to the value of our die 1 plus the die 2. So that's pretty simple. You just use the plus. If we use the minus, that would have just subtracted and so on. But now we'll be talking about relational operations in Java, which basically just are used to compare. So as you see at this bottom example where it says if num1 equals num2, that just shows to compare the two numbers to check if they're the same value. Because as we've been doing before, 1 equal is only used to assign a value. So if we're trying to compare these numbers, we will be using doubles equals. Also, if we want to compare, we can use and or. So like we said, for our conditions, for our bonus points, we could roll either a 7 or an 11, and we would get bonus points. So that's what we will be using for our if statements here, which I kind of explained a little bit in the previous example, but it just helps, it just directs the computer to know which pieces of code to run depending on the condition. So in our dice game, the condition will be for these bonus points, which Karin will now show us how to write that out.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Andrea. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, perfect. So we just finished creating, basically rolling our die because we assigned a value to them, right? And we summed them up. And now, what Andrea just explained, we're gonna have to use our if statements. And that's gonna help us make the game part where you can get bonus points, right? So you can only get bonus points in 2 different types of situations, right? So that'll be our pair bonus and then our 7-11 bonus. So let's go ahead and comment out our next step is going to be if statements for bonus points. And it's pretty simple. It's like in normal English language, you would say, if this happens, then we should do this. Else, we can do this other thing. So that's basically how our code's going to be written. Let's go ahead and type if, and then open parentheses. And if should be in lowercase letters. So if our sum of the two die equals 7, and then as Andrea explained, the reason why we're using 2 equal signs is because we're not just assigning a value like we do right here. We're actually saying that the sum has to be equal to something. So if we just use 1 equal sign, it would basically be saying that, oh, the sum is actually good. We're going to be assigning a new value to this variable. Not going to be die 1 and die 2. So like if this die 1 die 2 adds to 7, so that would be the sum equals 7. And then our or is going to be written by doing doing shift and then backslash. So these two stick looking characters, that means or, and we'll do sum again equals 11. Then let's type out our 711 bonus, the character that we created, the variable that we created up here for our bonuses, is going to be equal to, and then we said right here you can earn 5 bonus points. So we'll do our 711 bonus is going to be the 5 bonus points. And then enter the semicolon, and now let's enter and do our else statements, like what happens if it does not add up to 7 or 11. And you can see there I missed 1 equal sign, and VS Code was telling me with the red underlying line. So let's go ahead and use our indentation tip that we learned, and instead of writing else right here, let's click tab and write else. So what would happen otherwise is that 711 bonus is going to stay at 0 because we didn't get a 7 or an 11. So now we're going to do the bonus points if we roll the same die. So if you roll the die and it happens to both be a 2, then we'll get a pair bonus. So we'll do that by writing if, and then open our parentheses again. And then this time, the way that we'll know whether you get a pair is if one die equals the other die, right? Like you get 2, dice 1 is a 2 and dice 2 is a 2. So if die 1 is equal to die 2, then let's get out of the parentheses and say the pair bonus variable that we created at the beginning is going to equal, and this time you get more bonus points. We wrote that it would be 6 if you roll a pair. I guess it's like more rare, you know. So the pair bonus is going to be 6, and else if that doesn't happen, then our pair bonus is just going to be a 0. So there we go. We created our bonus points, but now we should go ahead and test, see that our dice are working right and that our bonus points are working right and our totals and everything. So we're going to go ahead and do that by printing our game results out in the console. So I'm going to do a new comment right here. And I'm going to say print game results. So, and then Natalie will go ahead and type this in the chat. But let's go ahead and type system.out.println, which is how we print anything in the console, and use double quotations for words, remember, and then we'll say dice roll, and then that's how we'll title like the die that we got. So you want to be able to know what your die 1 value is. So let's type plus die 1. And then we're going to do a comma so we can differentiate and know like the die 1 is the first number, comma, die 2 the second number. So we got to make sure to write that out, or else it'll be like 2 numbers together and not readable. And then let's do another plus because we're going to do die 2. And then make sure to end with a semicolon. Now we want to know what the sum is of these 2 die, because that's where our points root from, sorry. So system.out.println, and we're going to title this dice sum and a colon. Let me actually, there we go. So dice sum and leave a space, and then let's add our sum variable. We already calculated the sum up here, right? So dice sum. Then we're going to print out our bonuses. So print line. So our first bonus is 7-11 bonus. And let's add that variable. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy paste to make it a bit simpler. And this will be our pair bonus next. And then the final one that we need will be all our total points. And we actually haven't created yet what our total points will be. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll have to print out the total down here. Total is equal to total. So before we print the game results, let's go ahead and it's giving me an error because the variable is not initialized, which means we haven't assigned anything to it. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll type calculate total points right here. And the way we'll do this is we just have to add all of our points together, right? So we have our sum, and then we have our 7-11 bonus and our pair bonus, which will be either 0 if you didn't get it, or it will be 5 or 6 if you did get it. So simple enough, this total is going to equal all our variables that we have. So sum plus 7-11 bonus plus our pair bonus. So there we go. We have our game results. So let's go ahead and run our code to make sure that our dice work. Oh, sorry. And everything's going smoothly. So let's go ahead and click the run up here, run without debugging. And that's at the bottom, we saw this already, please enter your name. And then I'm going to do my name, Karen. And then perfect. So we have our welcome message, and then we have our dice roll. So these are 2 die that we created. As you can see up here, we said die 1 and die 2, and we printed them out, dice roll. And there's a comma with them. And then our sum, our bonus, unfortunately I didn't get any bonus points. And so my final point score is a 9, which is not too bad. So I'll hand it back to you, Andrea. But I will say that I'm gonna add some blank lines here just for readability after the total. So perfect. Okay, back to you.
Thanks, Karen. So now I will be explaining the last concept. So let's say that we want to roll our dice multiple times. So we wouldn't want to be creating like the same amount of code over and over and over again, because we have already written it once. So in order to loop through certain amounts of code multiple times, we will be using something called loops. Sorry, my computer is being a little slow right now. Okay, here's loops. So yeah, so loops allow us to repeat a certain piece of code multiple times. So we just need to set a starting point, an increment, and a stopping point. So in this case, the variable I contains the starting point. So in this case, it starts at 0. The loop of code will continue to run as long as I is less than or equal to n. And every time that the loop runs, I will increment by 1. So let's say if we want to roll our die 3 times, so I will start at 0. Anytime that I is less than or equal to 3, that means that while that is true, the line of code will run until it runs the 4th time, because then I will have been added 1 each time. And then that statement will no longer be true and it will exit the code. So this will make more sense once we see it in action when Garen codes it, but that is basically the purpose of a loop, is to run things for multiple times without having to write it again and again and again. So now Garen will show us how to do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrea. And we're actually at the final step now for our dice game, where we're just going to prompt the player to tell us how many times they want to play the game or roll their dice. And then that way we'll be able to play multiple times. So this means that we're going to have to run a loop. And first, the most important thing is to determine what do you want the computer to run several times or to loop several times. And so we don't need the welcome message printed more than once or the please enter your name. So this should not be in the loop. We also don't need to create a random several times that is just existing in there. But what we do need to do is assign different values to our die every time that a player wants to roll them again, because obviously once you roll, you'll get different numbers. And then that will mean that there will be a different sum. And so we'll have to calculate again for our bonus points and our total points and print our results. So the way we'll do that is that first, right here, we'll go back up in our code below random, and we're going to make our comment and say we're going to prompt for and read in the number of turns that the player wants to play. So if you will have noticed that the only variable that we haven't used yet is the one right here with the yellow underline, and it's int turns. So we're going to use that now. And let's go ahead and type out prompt for and read in the number of turns. There we go. So we'll enter, and then for readability, again, let's do system.out.println as a blank line. And I'll copy paste this. And now we're going to tell the user, please enter the number of turns you wish to play. So use your double quotation marks again for words. So please enter number of turns. And let's do a semicolon and a space. Okay. And then now we already created our input object where you can scan what a user says. We did it for their name. Now we're going to do it for the number of turns they want to play. So now we're going to initialize or assign the value to the turn. So our turn is going to equal, and then our scanner name is sc.nextInt. And you'll notice that it's different from scanning your name, because your name is words, so you don't have to say next int. But now we're doing a number, you know, like I want to play 3 times, I want to play 1 time. So it's called next int, so that the computer knows what type of data they're reading. So just sc.nextInt parentheses and then semicolon is what turns is going to be equal to. And then I'm going to do another blank line after turns. Perfect. So now that we know how many times they're going to play, we're going to use that for how many loops we're going to make the computer do. So let's go ahead and for our last step, make a for loop. That's the name of this type of loop. So for a for loop, we're going to type for, all in lowercase, and then start our parentheses, int I, and this is just what we use to count the loops. And int I is going to equal 1 in the beginning, so that it can count from 1. We already said that the computer counts from 0. And now we're going to say, we're going to use a semicolon, but still stay in the parentheses. So this time it won't be at the end of this line. So within the parentheses, semicolon, space, and then we're going to say that as long as I is less than, so use the less than symbol, the turns that were specified by the player, then turns plus 1 because we're starting at 1. And this would be the same as just saying that I equals 0, and we count until I is less than the turn specified. So it's kind of just up to you how you want to write that. I know the example says I equals 1, but I'll show you a different one that will work the same. And then we're going to say that I increases increases every time that we do this loop. And now we're going to use our curly bracket, and let's only do like the opening curly brace right after the parentheses. And we're going to use our indentation tip. So a nice tip for indenting stuff is to highlight everything that's going to be the loop, which is everything after our for loop there. And then we're going to click on the tab key. And then every time you click on that, it's going to move it further up. So now you can see that it's a lot easier to see that this is everything that's going to be repeated multiple times, our game. So now we need to close the loop. So go down here. And then after we print our game results, we're going to have a curly bracket. And the curly bracket just ends the loop. So we're going to repeat this many times. And after we repeat the game message for however many turns the player wishes to play, let's go ahead and write a thank you message. So after our loop ends, click enter, and then our comment out, print thank you message for playing our game. So if you guys remember, we're going to do system.out.println and use our quotation marks for words. And we're going to say, thank you for playing. And let's use our plus button and use the name. And then I like to use exclamation marks. I'm going to use an exclamation mark at the end. And then let's do a semicolon. And then one more thing we can do just to for clarity is let's go up here. Before we assign a data value, this is optional, but we can declare our turn number. And that just means that we'll know this is like turn number 1, this is turn number 2. And this is actually why we start with I equals 1 up here, and then turns plus 1. So that instead of saying this is turn 0, this is turn 1, it'll say this is turn 1, and then this is turn 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy paste, and Natalie's gonna send this in the chat, but it's just gonna be another system.out.println, and it's gonna be turn, and the hashtags are just optional, plus the I. So the I will be what number of turn we're doing. And let's go ahead, and we're now done with our dice game. So congratulations, and let's go ahead and run it so we can play the whole thing. So I'm gonna go up here, click run, then run without debugging, and let's play our whole game. So we saw this, please enter your name. So I'll actually use Andrea's name now. Andrea's playing the game.
Great.
I know. Andrea, how many times do you wish to play?
I want to roll 4 times.
Perfect. So I'm gonna type the number 4. Remember, it'll only read it if it's an integer, because that's how we did our variable. And there we go. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. And Andrea, it looks like you rolled a 12 on 3 out of your 4 turns. So
Wow.
this is definitely your losing turn, the turn number 2.
Yeah.
But thank you for playing, Andrea. See, we wrote our thank you message right down here. So back to you to close things off. But congratulations, everybody. I had so much fun building the game with you. I hope you were able to make it work. I know it's really hard sometimes. There's a lot of blocks, especially when you're first starting. But as long as you copy paste the code and see how it works, you can keep trying to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed learning about these Java concepts and running the game. And if you have more questions or you're more interested in learning about Java, here are some resources that can help you learn more. Like for our game, we can add like basically more things. We can be like, oh, in this turn was your winning turn, basically just by adding another if statement with the variables that we created. So the possibilities are really endless, and I hope you guys enjoyed creating this Java game.
Thank you guys so much for teaching us how to code. That was really fun. And thank you so much for everyone that came tonight to learn. So now we have the space open for some Q&A if there are any questions that we didn't get to or anything else. Yeah, so feel free to use the raise hand feature if you have a question, or also feel free to type it in the chat. So we'll give you guys a few minutes.
Yeah, and just quickly, I also posted setting up Visual Studio Code for Java development. So if some of you use the online editor, if you weren't able to get like the extensions installed and things like that, I included that, and we'll add that to our resources link that we send out and the follow-up email in a few days, which the resources link also has a text file that has the full code. Yeah, so we'll actually be posting the link to posting this on our website, and we can send it out to all the attendees, the link to it as a follow-up as well. But yeah, that link to the resources, Natalie, if you could post that one more time, that has all the instructions. It also has some text files in there that has the full code that Karen went through, and then we'll go ahead and make sure to add this setting up Visual Studio. So I think the only thing we were missing was the extension and then the Java development kit. So we do need that Java development kit installed on your machine, and it has that full setup in there. But if worse comes to worse, you can always use that online editor that has everything installed for you if you don't have space on your computer or anything like that. But yeah, like Christina said, if you all have any questions about the program that we just did, which is awesome, I think my first program was always Hello World. So coming into doing a full-on dice game is very exciting and very fun. I know I will be playing this dice game during my free time and just trying to tinker with it and play with it and make it more advanced. But if you all have any questions for us, for our wonderful instructors today, please definitely ask any questions that you all may have about Java, programming, career, life, anything. That's what this space is for this last few minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Samantha. And I just want to say that like you can always walk yourself through this workshop. I know you'll have the recording, but you'll also have the document that tells you like the requirements for the workshop. And so if you really want to test yourself, you can try and do it on your own to see what you remember, and by following the directions that are on there, you can see if you can get to where we did today. It's a good way to practice.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if there aren't any pending questions, Sam, are there any questions that you'd like to ask? Or
Yeah, so I want to learn a little bit more about our presenters. So can you all tell us a little bit about your career journeys? Like, how did you all decide to, you all are all interns at Microsoft right now, which is amazing. Happy Intern Week. I know tomorrow is National Intern Day. So happy Intern Week, Intern Day to all those interns out there working hard, getting all those hours and things in for their degrees. But yeah, let us know, like, how did you all get into tech? How did you all end up at Microsoft? I want to hear a little bit more about you all's journeys.
who would like to start?
I would like to start. I haven't talked as much as Andrea and Karen. So how I started in tech. Basically, I was the girl that always clicked on everything in the computer. So that's how I realized like I really like using computers and using every technology that I found. I like to break things. So that's what brought me here. And by the time that I had to choose which degree I wanted to study, I was torn between electrical engineering and computer systems engineering, mostly because I like how both did important impact in the world. So I chose computer systems engineering because I felt like it was the place where I could make more impact in other people's life, and also because I liked code so much, even though I haven't, when I was like between 15 and 18 years, I wasn't like so close to code. So I wanted to try that. And at the end, it's something that I really enjoy to do every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar story to Natalie. I was put into a STEM class in middle school. I did not know what STEM meant, but in that class, they taught us block coding, which are like the code that we just wrote. It was just in little blocks and you like click them together. And I thought it was really cool that you could make the blocks do whatever you wanted it to do. So I like the aspect of like being able to create anything. So then I just took all the computer science courses that were offered in my high school. And that's when I realized that I really liked problem solving and how problems can be solved with code, basically. So I just thought it was really cool. And that's when I knew that doing computer science was what I wanted to major in college, which is what I'm doing right now. And another passion that came from that is teaching other people how to code too, because as I was in my computer science classes, I didn't see a lot of girls, I didn't see a lot of Latinas. So now like I'm doing my best to try to teach others, because I feel like anyone that has an interest or like even wants to try it out or anything with tech like deserves to be here. And yeah, that's basically why I got into tech.
That's so awesome, Andrea and Natalie. I didn't know that, so that's cool to hear. Also, I didn't know that it was intern week or day tomorrow. That's really exciting. I don't know if you guys knew, but my journey to code was definitely different from Natalie and Andrea's. I wasn't like always interested in like coding or since I was young, which is really cool. Honestly, that you guys were exposed to it at like a young age and knew that's what you wanted to do. as Samantha said earlier, I'm not a computer science major. I am actually in marketing, and that's where my internship is. So I don't really use code like this in my work, but I always wanted to lean into the technical side of things, because I definitely think coding is really cool. I actually used to like look at coding and be like, how does that even work? Like, it's so complicated. Like, how are you just talking to a computer? But then I slowly like started to get into it. The reason why I learned Java is because I decided to go for it and take a class at my university actually last semester. So I'm actually really new to it, and Java was my first one. And so I can tell you that it's a good one to start with for sure if you're thinking about starting with Java. And this dice game was actually taught to me in my class in college, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, I would like to show other people how to do this. It's really cool. I know Samantha said like usually they teach you how to do like hello world, and that's just like how to print that message. But I thought like doing something cool would really like showcase like how much you can actually do with code. And so I really encourage you to go on your free time and explore all these things that you can do. Like Andrea said, the limitations like are not there. Like, it's endless possibilities for what you want to do and collaborate with other people. But this is definitely like something that I'm passionate about apart from my job, and I do think that it can be merged with marketing, because even though marketing has like a creative side, there's also like the technical side where you can use data and use programs in order to analyze like that creative part and like what you're doing with marketing, and come up with really cool things. Like right now I'm actually making a chat bot for my internship, so not exactly marketing, but there's also a creative side to code that I really like. You can get as creative as you want. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. I love hearing people's journeys, how they got into tech, how they got into the industry, even whether they're doing software development or not. And Karen, your marketing expertise, right? We need that on top of, and you need to understand the technology, right? You're working at a tech company, you need to understand what's going on with the technology, be able to speak the language in order to do any kind of marketing on top of it, right? So we did have one question in terms of degrees or certifications. Do you all have, what are the degrees you all are pursuing? Do you all have any other degrees or certifications currently?
I'll start. I'm studying computing systems engineering, and what I like of my program is that it's not just one programming language, the one that they teach us the whole program. It's like a mix of everything. So at this moment, I know how to code in Python, C and C++, Java, JavaScript, and I know like a lot of web development frameworks too. So I don't have certifications in like a specific language, but I know a lot of different. So it's easy for me like just to keep changing between one language and another. I don't have my degree yet because I'm still studying, but yeah, I'm studying computer systems engineering in Mexico.
Yeah, I can go next. And similar to Natalie, I don't have any like certificate in coding. I did take a class and I know what I know, but my degree is also not in computer science. However, I don't think it's necessary for you to have like a certificate. Like, it's something nice to have for sure. And there's several places where you can get it, but like, I know the way that I got into Microsoft is like I just added on my resume that I knew Java, and I know that like for marketing they really like having that technical side since you're coming into a tech company, of course. And that was definitely something that I think got my foot in the door. And so it's definitely super useful. But as far as certificates go, I don't have any. And I just want to mention that learning languages, like Natalie said, like she jumps from language to language. It's the program, our computer language is just like learning like English and Spanish. It's like you're learning, like they're not super different a lot of the time. It's like you're learning some different dialect, and it's really like learning a new spoken language, but except you're writing it.
Yeah, and similar to Karen and Natalie, I don't have any certificates, and I'm currently working towards my bachelor's degree in computer science. And that's my degree is like engineering focused. I take a lot of math classes and all. But yeah, I also have been exposed to lots of languages like Java, which is object oriented. There's also non-object oriented languages that I was just doing this past semester. So I feel like I'm getting a very well-rounded degree. And yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions for our instructors before we close out for the evening? Again, we'll share all these resources again, like I said at the end, the short link to the instructions, the text files. And yeah, if you all need anything, if not, I'll pass it back over to Christina.